Good afternoon, folks. This is the Charleston Gazette-Mail candidate interview, first candidate interview of the November general election. We are interviewing today state Senate candidates, Senate District 4, which includes all of Jackson County,
Yes.
about half of Putnam County and half of
All of Mason. Half of
County,
Rome.
and half of Rome. And we will have the candidates introduce themselves here shortly. I am Kelly Merritt. I'm opinion page editor of the Daily Mail side of the two opinion pages.
I'm Eric Hare, State House reporter for the Gazette-Mail.
I'm Whitney Burdett. I'm an editorial writer for the Daily Mail opinion page.
I'm Greg Moore. I'm the managing editor at the Gazette-Mail.
And I'm Dawn Miller. I'm the Gazette opinion page editor.
And we have Lisa running the camera.
Behind the scenes.
I am Brian Prim. I live in Fraser's Bottom, West Virginia. I'm a candidate for Senate District 4.
Hi, I'm Mitch Carmichael. I'm the current incumbent state senator for the 4th Senatorial District and live in Ripley, West Virginia, and it's been my pleasure to represent the 4th Senatorial District for the past 4 years.
Very good. Now, you've been in the legislature longer than 4 years, correct?
Yes, 10 years prior to that I was in the House.
Okay. I'll start with you, and then I'll ask you a question for you to respond, and then you would have a chance or the question will be directed to you as well. So 10 years, 14 years now, you've been in the legislature.
Yes.
And you saw, I guess, 10 of those as minority party? And
12. 12.
12 of those as
Yeah.
minority party. Okay, so only 2
Yeah.
now as majority party. And tell us about the changes that you've seen in the legislature in the 12 years you've been there, and how's that made West Virginia better?
Okay, well, let me just first say that anytime a single party has control, whether it be Democrat or Republican, for an extended period of time, in this case 83 years of legislative single party control, I think it's not good for the citizens. There should be some turnover in the process, and I think only when the people of West Virginia have become so frustrated with the current economic conditions were they willing to make that change. And they revolutionized our state. I mean, in fact, it was one of the, it was a national story that we took both branches of, or both chambers of the legislature in one term, the House and the Senate. We had a very slim margin in the Senate. But we were able to do a lot of changes that we believe needed done in West Virginia. Many of the things that we passed caused consternation with what is the Democrat Party now. They have, energized that portion of their electorate because we made significant changes. Things like tort reform, labor law reform for the right to work, the prevailing wage. We've done a lot of things in terms of tax structure, and we confronted a revenue crisis in West Virginia and balanced the budget in very incredibly difficult times with coal severance tax declines. And I think, as a Democrat governor has spoken about the crisis in our budget. He's a former finance chair, former president of the Senate, knows the budget well, Governor Tomlin, and he said it's been one of the most critical revenue crises in West Virginia. And the Republican legislature dealt with it. We had to raise cigarette taxes, cut budget in other areas, and dip into our rainy day fund. So those are all things that we've accomplished in a short 2-year time frame. And we look forward to sort of validating those aggressive new direction changes with the selection process and continue the progress that we've begun in West Virginia.
Okay, Mr. Brennan, just say the past 14 years, how have things gotten better or worse in West Virginia?
Well, I'll be honest, I probably didn't pay as much attention as I should for many of those 14 years. I was just working, representing the folks in my district and in my capacity as an attorney and moving forward. I don't like the talk about which party is in charge anyway, because I'll be honest, I am sick of parties running the government. I was at an event the other night, and a guy came up to me and asked me what side of the coin I was on. I guess referring to which party. And I said, well, you know, the state coins that they made, I'm on the West Virginia side. I'm tired of, I don't think either party nationally or to some degree the way they've acted now in the state represent my constituents very well. So there we go. As far as the, you know, talk that one party had control for 83 years and now we've had another one in charge for 2, the reason that I'm running, the reason that I was asked to run is there's a lot of people tired of the party now after just 2 years. And I know Senator Carmichael, you know, hears those concerns, and I know he doesn't agree with all of them. I obviously disagree with the statement that, you know, the labor changes they made are good for the state. I think they're horrible for the state, and I think they will only continue to get worse. And I'm assuming we'll have a chance to talk about those in more detail. I agree with Senator Carmichael. We have a serious budget crisis now and into the future. I feel that the priority should be on figuring out what we're going to do budget-wise. Education, I think that we need to not only make sure that we maintain and improve education, but have that focus towards something for the future. I think that jobs and in industry or types of work that we can get into this state are going to be important, and utilizing our state higher education institutions to help with that is going to be important. And my criticism of this past session was that I don't think any of that was dealt with during the session. It was pet projects that they wanted to attack labor or carry guns or drink raw milk, all the stuff we've all heard about, but they didn't focus on the budget until it was late. And I know not all of that, and I will tell people, not all of that is Senator Carmichael's fault. I know that he wasn't the cause of a lot of the issues relative to the budget. But still, there was, and getting back to this idea of parties, they failed to do the only job that you had to do, which is make sure we got a balanced budget during the session. It cost the state a lot of money, and that's what I hear from my constituents, and that's, as a non-politician, and probably do a poor job at things like this, that's why I have been asked to run and am running, to try to give a voice back to the residents of our district.
Okay, well, let's start with the budget specifics. So both of them signaled to us in the questions we asked you, tobacco taxes were part of the solution. Would either of you care to raise the tobacco tax any more to help close the budget gap?
Well, I have proposed, I've been on record, and it's clear, I've proposed a $1 increase in the tobacco tax virtually my entire term in the service in the legislature. So there's more to solving this budget crisis, though, than raising revenue through taxes. I believe we can raise revenue to the state coffers by reforming the manner in which we tax our citizens and making it more fair, efficient, and equitable across all income streams. And so I have been a proponent for raising tobacco taxes, and my record is very clear on that.
Sure. Tobacco tax?
I agree with Senator Carmichael on that point. I stated back in the spring at some of the forums we were at, I thought it should be $1. It is a way to raise revenue and or decrease a habit that cost us money on the back end with illnesses related to tobacco usage. So with that, I agree. I think there was a lot of political games being played, and they were played by both parties. And I don't hold back on either one, and that was part of the cause of the delay in getting the budget through.
Okay.
Just to remind our readers, what did the tobacco tax get raised to?
It's an additional 65 cents over where it was.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you're
Yeah.
fine. No, I couldn't remember the exact numbers at end, that it went back and forth a few times. And
Well,
then,
okay, if you don't mind to, let's go through a couple others quickly, and then we'll go back to the more substantive reforms you were talking about. How about food tax? Any interest in food tax?
I am, I don't know how it will play to come back now. I don't, the fact that it was taken away, I don't think that there was a big decrease in what we pay when we eat or buy it. I think, if it would have stayed in place, it would have been nice to have had this year. And having worked in a budgetary capacity with various union organizations where I've been in health and pension funds, I know, it gets easy to want to take back things that we pay or we budget, and we do this at home on our own when times are good and we don't really need the money in there. And then you get yourself in a bind later on. And obviously, I don't think that was Senator Carmichael's doing to remove the food tax. So, I don't put that blame on him as far as, a debate between us, but I am in favor of it, being returned. I wish it hadn't been taken away in the first place.
With regard to the food tax, here's where the way that I would like to answer this question. When you become very specific on any item of taxation, I think it needs to be, for instance, the food tax, needs to be talked about in a much broader context. I'm not willing to say I would put back on the food tax without seeing in a broader context how it affects the entire budget. Now let's just say the food tax, it's a very regressive tax. It hits the poor people the hardest. And so we have to be cognizant of that. But in the broader context of, for instance, if you put the food tax back on and you do an earned income tax credit or some other mechanisms like that, you could, in a broader context, talk about tax reform. But as you become very specific on any one item, it's hard to answer it in that vacuum.
Okay, well, I welcome you answering with the details like that, because I was going to ask about EITC next.
Yeah.
So food tax is more palatable to you if there's an earned income tax credit. Is that what I'm hearing?
In the broader context of tax reform, yes.
Right. Okay.
So as we look at various mechanisms to incent growth, provide jobs, incent the private sector to create opportunities and jobs, we recognize that in West Virginia we have, and it's been widely reported, that our tax structure does not accommodate job growth, capital formation, entrepreneurship. And so we want to structure our taxes in a way that is less regressive, fairer across the broad spectrum, and provides incentives for capital formation, job creation, and opportunities.
Okay. And I'm just trying to get to some of these specifics. So if it's all right, Kelly, we'll bounce back
Go right
a
ahead.
couple times and then we'll move on to something else.
Whatever you need to do.
So earned income tax credit?
I agree.
Okay.
Yes.
Cool. So how about you you mentioned specific taxes. The next thing I was going to ask about is soft drinks. An increase on taxes for soft drinks? No nutritional value, health problems?
Yeah, well, again, you're getting into a specific area without looking at some other additional offsets. Here's what I would say in the broader context. I don't like raising revenue by taxing. I want to reform tax structure in a way that allows the economy to grow and generate additional revenue. And there may be areas, like for instance, we kind of sort of agree on the tobacco tax, raise some of that, and we need to look at the most onerous tax, the most job-killing tax we have in West Virginia is the tax on business inventory and equipment. It taxes the capital formation that creates jobs in West Virginia. It's been widely recognized as the most job-killing tax in our state. And so we need to, now that's a constitutional amendment, there's things that has to be done in that regard, but we need to look at those avenues to reform our tax structure and create opportunities for people.
How about digital downloads? Thoughts about taxing digital downloads?
Are you talking about internet sales tax?
Yeah, well, I download a book on the internet.
Yeah, that's the same
I
thing.
don't pay any taxes on
right.
it, but if I buy it downtown, I do.
Right, and so that is, I forget the nomenclature exactly, but it is referred to as internet sales tax. And yes, I've been for that. I am for, now that's a federal issue that has to be dealt with, but I've been for the parity between Main Street businesses and internet businesses.
Okay, good. Sir?
Well, I think that is a huge issue going forward. In general, I think my answer, yes, would be I am for that. I support that. Our world is changing around us. This isn't really a political issue between Senator Carmichael and I. This is something that all of us in the room have to deal with and understand. And, the internet and technology has changed a lot of things about our world in many ways. That's part of the problem that we face today with manufacturing jobs and technology jobs are just the way the world works. It's different now. So that is an issue where people, now can buy anything online. And taxes that are reasonable, and I think everyone would agree to pay on something they buy at the store, are now being lost to that type of situation. So, yeah, as Senator Carmichael said, that's more of a federal issue, but I think it's something that all states are going to need to look into, but it's really going to hurt states like West Virginia.
I might just add, you're required to pay it now. You just, many people don't, but I am, and I think probably Brian and I agree, that it is to put parity between Main Street retail brick and mortar and internet sales. And, so that would generate some revenue, yes, totally agree.
There might be a slightly different wrinkle with downloaded things, books, music, and things that might be a little bit different than other merchandise, but.
Maybe not.
Okay, so anything else either of you want to add on the whole idea of what kind of taxes you would like or not like? Anything we missed that you want to?
Well, as I always, say when I talk to people, I don't like any tax. I don't think any of us do. The bottom line is we have to have the, enough funds to run our state. And there are essential services. I would continue with what's been done and being done to try to evaluate our government, our services. It's no different than any of us at home. You've got to figure out a way to live within your means. We want to try to increase means as much as we can and then decrease spending to make a match. It's not an easy job. I don't think it needs to be a partisan job. It just needs to be something that we can continue to work on to benefit our citizens.
Okay. What's next?
You're not privy to this until tomorrow's paper, but we have the Daily Mail opinion page will run a column by our local columnist Mark Satt about education reform or lack thereof. And that is the Public Works education efficiency audit several years ago. And so they've seen no state organization or no state that incorporates rules of law into its education system in the state of West Virginia. And as his column talks about, there hasn't been a lot of change since then. He was telling me personally, he spoke to the school board group recently, and they were just all talking about how overregulated they are and how limited they are in what they can actually do. But for both of you, what can West Virginia do to improve its public education system?
Go ahead.
Yeah, well, you can summarize that entire education audit by essentially what you've said, the top-down approach in Charleston, West Virginia. They have encountered no state that has such a centralized bureaucracy that manages education as in West Virginia. The best thing that we can do to improve education performance in West Virginia is to return control to the local level. That gets at Section 18 and 18A of our code, of our West Virginia code. And I am an absolute firm proponent of local decision-making at the county level to put administrators in control and the teachers, allow them to teach. They have been overregulated to an extreme degree, and we have wonderful educated teachers in West Virginia that are too constrained by Charleston's bureaucracy. So we need to put the local school system in charge. That education audit, there's savings associated with it, but even more so than the savings are the performance of our students. And so I'm one that believes that more control at the local level is the good thing.
I agree with him 100% on that quote. More control at the local level. I just spoke to a group of teachers last week, and that's what we discussed. They go to school, they are trained, just like we are all trained at our jobs, and how to teach children. They know how to reach them. They know what's best. They know what the curriculum needs to be, and I believe they should be in charge. There's definitely a top-heavy situation in West Virginia. I think that the report outlines that. not knowing what the article's going to say. In general, I understand the gist of it. And with that, I'd stated earlier, education is of utmost importance to our future. We've got to get that on track. And my steps would include local level, the teachers being in charge. We've got to make sure we fund PEIA. That was a big issue this year, and I think it was glossed over a little bit, but that has to be, you've got to be able to attract teachers the best we can. We've got great teachers now, and they do it for low pay, and at least making sure that they're secure in their retirement. And I speak to that just on a personal level. My mother was a teacher for almost 40 years and still works in the state school system. So but it is something that needs to be returned to the local level.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Yes.
Two prongs. One is, do you believe that the state should be allowed to take over a local school system? Because I'm not sure how many we currently have, but it's always about 5 or 6 counties. And the other question was the funding. Is there any changes in the funding formula that you guys would recommend? Because I think we're centralized because all the money comes into the state instead of in other states, they have all their money sort of kept in their local school districts.
You want to go first?
First, yeah, the takeover.
Okay,
Oh, and another one I thought
let me just make sure I'm getting the.
Reduction, I've heard a lot of talk about reduction of the number of total school systems, which would seem to be against the idea
It
that
is.
you guys are talking about. I've heard a lot of people say, oh, we only need 20 school systems, we don't need 55. Sorry about that, that's 3, but
Yeah, no, that's good. I'm going to take them one at a time. Should the state be in a position to take over a county school system? I believe ultimately, yes. You cannot continue to observe failing. You can't continue to fail students in a county and do nothing about it. So ultimately, yes. I think there needs to be a higher bar than is currently in place because, and let me just say this, the state takeovers of school systems have been pathetic, have had pathetic outcomes. And they have not worked out in the past. But we cannot turn a blind eye as a state, as a society, to and leave a generation of children behind at a county level if they're unwilling to do anything to improve the performance of the school system. So yes, we need to be able to, at the level, to protect our children and provide for them a 21st century worthy education that allows them to compete. Your second question was funding mechanisms. That's one of the issues as it relates to our entire tax structure. We have this centralized system that takes the money from the counties, brings it to Charleston, and returns a portion of it to the counties. And so we've gone through these gyrations to say these are still county employees, although they're receiving state money. It's a completely ridiculous system that needs to be reformed. As it relates to taking over the school systems and then funding these school systems at the local level, the funding should be more connected to the school system at the local level rather than washing that money at the state level. And then your third question was,
Larger school systems.
oh yeah, the takeover, the consolidation of county boards of education and so forth. There is a school of thought that says in other states they have more school districts. And as a result of that, they do better because they're more connected at the local level. I think we're administration level heavy at the state. There's no question. We need to wash the state education system and consolidate positions there and reduce it enormously. But I think more local control is good. So if you have local entities that, I've been one that, we probably Brian and I are part of a company on the avenue of charter schools to provide competition for the public school system. We need to do things to change this makeup of our poor education outcomes. We have the teachers in place that can perform and the administrators if we allow them to do it. So more local control is good. And more funding at the local level, less going to the state is a good thing. And
Sure.
consolidation of county boards of education should be an available option to counties, but it shouldn't be forced upon them by the state.
All right, well, Eric, make sure he was good.
Oh, I'm good. Go
Okay,
ahead.
okay. Again, this is something that we agree in a large part on. As far as the state having the ability to take over a school system, it has to be there. You can't let one fail. It's not like a private business. We have to make sure that it's got a mechanism in place so that we don't forget the children. Now, getting back to what we've said all along about localizing them more and doing away with all of the rigmarole at the top, it probably does need to be a higher standard. I'm not privy to exactly what the standards are, but you can't do without, but it needs to be there. As far as the funding goes, I think that's, in general, I agree with Senator Carmichael. We've got issues in how we collect the money and then divvy it back up. The fear that I have without having more specific information, not wanting to sound like a politician when I say that, but is, we have a lot of rural counties. And, I don't know if every county could have a self-sustaining enough school system if the funding was just localized and not monitored in some way. And these are all issues that are not easily fixed. Again, they're not political issues that should separate parties. We all want the same thing. We want our children to be educated. And how we provide a good education to a child in a rural county as compared to a child here in Charleston is something that's going to take work and it's going to take effort. I guess my thought would be every decision needs to be made thinking about the children and not about some entity or who we're going to help. When it comes to consolidating school systems, I am not opposed to that. Again, you start getting back to the same situation of control. If the counties are similar, if they've got similar interests, and that can make it run more efficiently. It's what happens in business. It's what the market does call for. And Senator Carmichael is correct. I am opposed to the charter school idea totally. I feel that we would be taking funds away from most likely the more rural regions of our state and providing it to just a select few. And anytime you start getting profit brought into the education system, I think it just rubs me the wrong way. So I am opposed to the idea of charter schools.
Education, what are your thoughts on Common Core?
I tell you, Common Core has been, that there's a school of thought that believes that it's a takeover by the Obama administration of our school systems. And we need to absolutely push back against a federal takeover of our school system. I've sat here and advocated for more local control. And what we need to put in place are standards that are applicable across the broad spectrum of the educational environment. There are standards. Science is science, math is math. And so, but the flexibility at the local level to select the curriculum, to achieve the standards that are nationally normed standards, not Obama administration standards, should be the avenues that we pursue. So in terms of Common Core, which I think is now basically a moot issue, we do not, in West Virginia, the state school board has changed their standards. Now there are those who say they're very similar to what the Common Core standards were. And, but this is a decision for the local level to allow them to pick the curriculum that achieves the objectives that they have determined their children need to have to compete in a 21st century economy. So it's kind of my answer. Well, it's exactly my answer because it's an issue that has been, I think, demagogued to some degree. but we need to protect against federal takeover of our curriculum and of our state standards for math and science and all the curriculum disciplines.
We should just be running together on most of these issues. I also, am not a fan of Common Core. Again, I don't think it's some sort of takeover by the Obama administration, but it is a situation where we've got these rules and regulations and requirements put in place by folks who aren't involved in the local level and with our children. Now, as Senator Carmichael said, we do need to have some sort of mechanism by which we can make sure we are properly educating our children. That's going to be tests. I don't know how it was done when I went to school. I know we took achievement tests every so often. I feel like that the folks that I went to school with learned adequately and turned out okay. So I know there needs to be testing, but in general to say we would need Common Core, I don't agree with that.
Let me just, if I could, just elaborate just a second. The testing is the issue in a lot of these places. I mean, the inordinate amount of testing that we subject our students to is the crux of the issue in many cases, and we need to get away from that. Continually testing and teaching to a test. So it's very important that we instill the curriculum and the knowledge in our students without overburdening them with tests, and our teachers as well.
Okay.
Craig, you have
I was reading a story yesterday about how there's going to be a couple of marijuana initiatives on the Arkansas ballot, which is not necessarily somewhere you'd expect to see that. I'm wondering where you all stand on both legalizing medical marijuana in West Virginia, and as a couple of states have done, doing it for commercial purposes.
I've been a sponsor of of medical marijuana. I believe it is a compassionate response to those who, under a doctor's supervision, have been confined relief. I mean, I've heard testimony from cancer patients, those veterans affected by PTSD, children having seizures, that this drug is effective. I've also heard testimony that, and I'm persuaded that it has an effect of eliminating or reducing the amount of opioid prescriptions. And so, while it may not be a popular issue, I think those who understand it more, as you become more scientifically aware and so forth. I've watched Dr. Sanjay Gupta's report on it as well. Medical marijuana has value. And who are we to say that a person suffering who can find relief with this should not have it as an option? So I'm a proponent of medical marijuana. I am not a proponent of recreational marijuana, and I will not vote for it or support it.
Despite what some people claim would be the significant economic benefits?
Yeah, I think there are, much like people talk about the significant economic benefits of gambling, I think there are unintended consequences of legalizing for recreational use what I consider to be a gateway drug and other things. So I don't think our society is ready for that in West Virginia. I just don't. But medical marijuana is something that I am a proponent of. Yes.
I likewise would be a proponent of medical marijuana. I've spoken with many physicians that I know on the issue, and as Senator Carmichael said, especially when you compare it to a lot of the drugs that are being prescribed, I don't see where there's a major difference. In fact, I have some physicians who don't even agree with his statement regarding the gateway drug, but it's as bad as many others. As far as marijuana in general, I get asked that question probably as much as any since I've started this campaign. And I'll be honest, I don't have an answer. I have not research, because it's not an issue to me and the people that I am being asked to represent, that is at the forefront. Knowing what has or hasn't happened in the states where they have followed through, I don't know. If it's a situation where drug use is down and crime is down and your tax revenue is up, then it would be something to be considered. But if the facts are it does not do that, then I wouldn't. So I'm kind of open on that situation. I have never tried it, so I have no idea of its effects either way.
Okay. In the beginning, when Mr. Carmichael was talking about what the legislature has done over the past several years, he mentioned tort reform. As a lawyer, I
Yep.
suspect you might have a particular opinion or two about that.
I do, and it's not even so much as a lawyer. I mean, my issue, and this is one of the areas, and Senator Carmichael and I have talked, and I would even say became friends during this process, and we know where we differ. I have a huge problem with tort reform. For the main reason being, I feel that one of the issues that I have regarding the parties and the politics involved in this is the attempts by Senator Carmichael's party sometimes to label themselves as, constitutionalists. My stance, and this has been well known by the folks in my jurisdiction, pro-life, pro-right to freedom of religion, pro-gun. I'm an avid hunter and outdoorsman and Second Amendment advocate. When you get to the Seventh Amendment and the right to a trial by jury, the tort reforms that have been put in place by West Virginia and many other states is no different than an attack on the Second Amendment. Absolutely not. It's the same thing. When you start saying that someone doesn't have the right for a jury of their peers to award them damages as a result of someone else's negligence, when you start putting caps on how much someone is able to receive, you're taking away their property. And I feel it's unconstitutional. Our Supreme Courts, we get a lot of politics involved, have disagreed. So from that standpoint, I'm not a fan of the tort reforms that they've proposed. And then as a step further, I think it's really unfair. We're in a situation now where a medical malpractice reforms were put in several years ago. Senator Carmichael was probably in the legislature at that time. And the reasoning behind it was we weren't going to have any doctors. Well, from the physicians I've spoke to, their insurance premiums, which would have been what was being affected, haven't dropped at all. So the same amount of money is going in. And they may disagree, but I haven't seen it. But what we have is a situation where if someone calls me who's reached retirement age, no matter what has happened to them in a medical negligence situation, they no longer have an avenue to recovery because they have capped their damages, and to a point with other legal maneuverings within the bill that we know in order to pursue a case for them, they won't have anything to collect. It will be eaten up in cost. And so it basically has eliminated the right of a retired person to have a claim if they do have a medical negligence against them. And so I still feel that that's just wrong. I think our desire then should have been to get rid of the doctors who were being sued and paying. Everybody wants to say there's frivolous lawsuits. Even before, and I agree with the requirements they put in place about certificates of merit and having to get doctors to sign off on it and show that you have a valid claim before you file. And as a business person, which I am, I don't know who takes these cases that aren't going to seek recovery. But I know from being in front of many juries over the years that our nature in West Virginia, Democrat or Republican, is a very conservative state. How hard it is to get juries to award damages and make any entity, business, or person pay money. So when I see huge verdicts, I never think, oh, this is some crazy system. I think someone has done something horribly to a person. Because when you get 6 or 12 strangers in a room and they decide to award millions of dollars to someone, they don't have this agenda. It is a horrible situation more often than not. And I feel that that was part, and we've discussed this before, of a catering to business interests and that. So I feel that it's unconstitutional and it's bad for our state.
Well, thank you for the question, because I think, in many respects, Mr. Prim and I have agreed on a lot of the issues, but there are areas where we part, and it's civil justice reform and labor issues. And so I think it's kind of nice to just put, okay, like he can describe me and I can describe him, and I don't think we disagree with each other. I am a stalwart supporter of tort reform in West Virginia. I want to talk a little bit about the medical malpractice reform that we've done that we implemented several years ago, of which I was a sponsor and a proud supporter, because our doctors were, and we may disagree on this, but our doctors were in a crisis. They were leaving our state, and we can make the broad statements that we want a fair court system and all that kind of stuff. We do, obviously, yes, we do. But we want to have a society here in which businesses and people can feel like they get a fair shake. And we brought ourselves in West Virginia, what we tried to do with our tort reform scenarios is bring us to the middle. We were identified, we're the only state in the nation to be on the judicial hellhole list every year that it was published. Every year.
That's the judicial hellhole list from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce.
Yes, right, it is.
It's
But
the
Institute for Legal Reform.
Institute for Legal Reform, which is a branch of the,
Oh.
yeah. So, yes, it's that list. But they evaluate all 50 states. They're not picking on West Virginia. And so we look at these scenarios in which we are out of step with the rest of the nation. And businesses look at this and say, do we really want to put our balance sheet on the line in the state of West Virginia, hire employees there, and conduct business? And the answer was no, they didn't. And so we're trying to make these changes that enable businesses to feel confident that their employees and that the business entities themselves will be treated much like they are in other states. When we're out of step with the rest of the nation is when we suffer the consequences of fewer jobs and fewer opportunities. And so I completely respect the position of Brian and those that want to inhibit the tort reforms that we have put in place. Completely respect that, and I know he does so with the most noble motives. But from our perspective, we wanted to bring West Virginia to the middle. Not be an outlier that, hey, you can't sue anybody in West Virginia. We wanted to bring us to the middle. And many of these reforms that we implemented were broadly, had bipartisan support from across the aisle. And most of those were done in our 2015 session. Most of the significant tort reform, capping the punitive damages and joint and several liability. Some of those really significant pieces were done then and had broad bipartisan support. And I think ultimately will be redound good for the people of West Virginia. There'll be more jobs and opportunity as a result.
Can't let you go without asking you guys about the HB2, North Carolina's transgender bathroom bill. Senator Carmichael, you stand a chance of becoming Senate President. Some of your colleagues, at least one of them, has made it their #1 priority for the upcoming session to pass an identical bill to HB2 in North Carolina. Will you let that bill run through the Senate, and ultimately how will you vote on that?
Well, if I have the privilege, if I'm able to win the election, Brian has a lot to say about that. But if I have the privilege of being Senate President, I will not run a dictatorial system that one person's opinion has more sway than any other senator. If it's a position that's broadly supported, it'll get its fair hearing. No one wants to see men in women's restrooms or women in men's restrooms. Nobody wants to see that. That's not anything that we condone as a society. We want to prohibit that and stop that occurrence. HB2 in North Carolina has caused grave consequences for their economy. In fact, just last night, I think the NCAA pulled out their championships games as a result of it. Now, we don't do things as a society just to cater to commercial interest. I mean, we have a moral society here. And we want to protect with every vigilance we can the religious freedom and the free expression of religion in our society. Likewise, though, we want to be vigilant to defend those who feel discriminated against. And we have a loving, open society, and we want to protect that, Eric. And so, you know, we're not going to put bathroom police in our restrooms. We're just not going to do that. I don't think that's anywhere, any way, shape, or form. If there's ways that we can, you know, protect and have people feel more confident about the privacy of the restroom, then certainly we're going to pursue those things. But as it stands right now, I think we have so many problems in West Virginia. The best thing we can do for our society is to provide a job for our citizens, or allow the private sector to provide jobs for our citizens. So, yeah, long way of answering, but I think it's not a short answer. There's feelings involved with this. There's misperceptions, and there's, you know, I'll be anxious to hear what Brian has to say about it. But we want to protect the religious expression, free religious expression in our society, and we want to be vigilant against discrimination also.
So if somebody would put HB2, as has been suggested, we just carbon copy that and put that in front of you guys, how would you vote on it?
Well, I'd have to see it. I mean, I really would have to see it. I think my initial impression is that has been a disaster in North Carolina, but you know, without reading the context of the bill, there may be ways to change it and make it more palatable. But come on, man, let's focus on providing jobs, opportunity, growth, and hope for our citizens, as opposed to, you know, putting bathroom police everywhere. But having said that, I don't want men in women's restrooms, and I don't want women in men's restrooms, and I've had these ads run against me that say that I do. That's a complete falsehood, and it's paid for by, you know, these people that I think have another agenda. So, you know, I'll say it to the camera, I'll say it to anybody here. I do not want men in women's restrooms, and it's a freaking, I mean, it's a travesty that somebody would run a stupid ad like that, and they should be ashamed of themselves for running. And if they ran it against Brian, I'd say the same thing about him. He is, that is beyond the pale, and as newspaper people, you ought to take them to task for it, because it's wrong.
And we've had this
Yeah.
discussion before,
Yeah.
and I agree totally. Same way that I'm sure I will be in a White House lawn with President Obama
Yeah.
or Hillary Clinton before
Right.
this election's over, which, you know, I don't think is coming from you.
Yeah.
I mean, I am positive I will be, because, you know, I've been told to expect that, and that will come out, and I've never had the fortune of meeting either one of them, but I assume that that's what will be there, and that's part of the politics that I hate. I think Senator Carmichael stood, you know, properly in his vote on this issue in the Senate this year, and I agree with him. Again, I know what he's saying, and as a lawyer, you always want to say you don't know exactly till you read the details of anything how you would vote. In general, I am, yes, opposed to the bill in North Carolina. Kelly and I talked about this before I came in. I actually think, and I know Senator Carmichael, you know, sometimes takes me to task on my thoughts that there's this out-of-state business conspiracy thing going on with certain bills, but those bills were pushed in a lot of states, a lot of rural states. And I think the people who are pushing them are not residents of North Carolina, they're not residents of West Virginia, and their goal is exactly what is happening, to create a poor business climate for the state. Now, I would go on to say that the attack on prevailing wage and right to work, which Mitch and I disagree on, is more of the same, you know, anti-state agenda from out-of-state folks to make us a poor place to be. But that particular bill is bad. It has no value, and that's why I think it's more political than substantive. And what I mean by that is any of the stories you hear and the reasons that people tout this about a man in a woman's bathroom exposing himself, or kidnapping a child, for goodness sakes, are all crimes today. If you accidentally walk into the women's restroom, it's not a crime. If you exposed yourself in a women's restroom, you are guilty of a crime today. So this idea that we're going to pass a law that somehow, because you're dressed like a woman or a woman's dressed like a man, has to go into a certain restroom is nothing but adding fear, I think, to get people to react. I am uneducated on the political process. I've worried about representing residents of this state since I've been out of law school. I've lived here my whole life and proud to do it. A lot of what we see going on a multi-state level with legislation is fear with political motivation. It's happened at different times. I've been in 8 years ago, 12 years ago, where people would come to meetings and say, I'm being told, we won't be able to go to church if a certain president gets elected. That's just not true, but it's ways to create fear. Then, of course, we have the gun issue. If a certain president gets elected, you're not going to have guns. Again, as a proud gun owner, for what it's worth, the current administration has been softer on all guns than any Bush administration ever was. So, it turned out not to be, but those are things that we all know aren't an issue. Senator Carmichael is exactly right. We have a lot of issues in this state, and that isn't one of them. If I were fortunate enough to be elected senator, I would not be a leader, obviously, and I would vote, no to the bill as I understand it.
I'm going to wrap up unless
Yeah.
somebody's got
No, it's good.
a question that I have. Okay. Thank y'all both for being here. And it is a pleasure to see two individuals who are both, obviously qualified and interested in the job, just in doing what they're concerned to do. So thank y'all for running. I'll just start with you, Mr. Prim, because so you're elected, and you just magically get to push one thing through the Senate, and everybody says, I want to support you on your one thing that's most important to you. What would you push?
Well, that's a tough question. and just in that we have so many issues. There's budget issues, there's education issues. But if I had a pet project that I am most worried about, it would be the right to work. The right, which right now is on hold while Judge Bailey makes a decision. But the right to work legislation, I think, is awful for this state. It is not a union issue. I am a proud supporter of organized labor. I worked organized labor. My dad was a contractor who dealt with organized labor. And I think the fundamental right of workers having the right to have a voice is what separates us from slavery. And that's why we have 40-hour work weeks. It's why we work overtime. It's why we have OSHA and all that. That's what was built by organized labor. And right to work is nothing more than an attack on that. And in particular, it's going to hurt the non-union workers whose wages are set based upon union negotiations. For example, in our state, we've got obviously UPS with a lot of drivers represented by the Teamsters Union, and you have FedEx, which is a non-union company. I am positive, well, in fact, I know that FedEx pays their employees based on the wages that the UPS drivers get, because if not, they would be dealing with Ken Hall within a week because everybody would vote to organize. If the idea that, again, this is another one of those political issues that went out. The basis behind it saying that we don't want our money going to represent or support President Obama is a falsehood, because you already did not have to contribute to your PACs. Your money that you pay in dues for representation by a union is separated from that. So that's not a situation. But to say that folks working in a particular shop now can say, well, I don't want to pay my dues at all, but yet get representation is a taking. Again, it's another unconstitutional act. And I know that folks that support it will say that, well, they don't have to represent them. The issue is when you read the law as written, which is just crazy to me, and again, I think it came from out-of-state authors. No one in state thought this is going to be a good idea. you look at it, it places criminal penalties on an employer if you treat an employee any different because of their lack of affiliation with the union. So you're in a situation where, as an attorney, I'm going to advise everybody, I don't care if you only got one union employee, you pay everybody the same thing, or you're going to risk some sort of criminal situation. So it will essentially give everybody the same benefit. Everyone will quit paying their union dues, the unions will disappear, then wages will drop. And there will be no protection. There is no doubt about that. There has not been any credible business that I've seen who came to the state thinking that it's not going to have unions, it's going to be right to work. The governor, Senator Manchin, came out and said that there were no such situations that occurred when they were in charge. So I just think that law is taking us down a bad road that's going to hurt the working people of this state. Obviously, there's plenty of businesses. I know plenty of business owners, and they pay union wages, and they work with unions, and they make a fine profit and a fine living and have a fine life. So it's not like we are keeping businesses out. In fact, I would argue that the fact that we had prevailing wage along with the right to work kept jobs here, and the evidence is starting to show that on the jobs that are bid otherwise, they're going down to state contractors. So right to work would be my #1 issue.
If you could either respond to right to work or just say what the one thing you'd like
Well,
to...
maybe in the context of my response to the answer, I'll address that in just a moment. My #1 task as a senator is to provide opportunity and jobs for our citizens. And that overwhelmingly, it comes down to a lot of different issues that make up the opportunities for the private sector to create jobs. More than anything in West Virginia, our people need jobs. We have the lowest workforce participation rate in America and the highest drug usage. And I think there's a correlation there between the lack of opportunity for our citizens to have a meaningful career and job here in West Virginia. So in order to provide these jobs and opportunity, we need to do the tax reform. We need to implement the education reforms that we talked about. We didn't get to regulatory reform. Our regulatory burden in West Virginia is onerous, and we need to reform that. The things that, and I think Brian and I just fundamentally, I think the voters have an easy, clear choice. I mean, he wants to roll back the changes that we made to our right to work and make this a non-right to work state. I believe that it provides more opportunities for our citizens. We just fundamentally disagree on that. And so for a voter, it's an easy choice. If you believe, that, and I don't want to put words into your mouth, but I believe that if we pursue the path of providing a right to work state where you can join a union if you want, you have every opportunity to do that. But I think it opens up opportunities for manufacturing companies and other business entities to come here to West Virginia and to provide the jobs and the opportunity that our citizens so desperately need. So I hope it works out that way. I believe that it will. I'm convinced that the WVU study that we commissioned, it validated the fact that it would improve the job climate in West Virginia. 25, West Virginia is on hold, 25 states have right to work legislation now. All but one state have higher per capita incomes and more jobs and higher percentage of people working than West Virginia. Mississippi's less than us, but 24 other states that have right to work are doing better than they are in West Virginia. So it's worth a try. It's worth the try, because what we are doing in West Virginia is not working. And all these social problems that we have, all these, as it relates to drugs, and our budget crisis and our education system, we have more money for all of those programs when our people are working. So my absolute number one priority is jobs and opportunity for our citizens in West Virginia.